question. Are you able to see what I'm sharing? Those that are on the call.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome, cool. So as people join us, we'll let them in to join the main session. But welcome everyone to UX in BRUXM July session. I feel like it's been a while since we've had one of these. But the intention was always to have a regular cadence, like once a month. I just can't remember when the last one was. I think lots of time has flown by in between then and now. But very thankful for you for being here, and obviously with our guest speakers joining us as well. Thank you for joining. So just a reminder as to why UX in BRUXM exists. So the objectives are, with every session, every meetup, and the actual community outside of these talks, is to A, learn and discuss, B, network with fellow individuals in the industry, active participation as well, whether it's a discussion during these talks or we want to try and discuss something on our Slack channel. It's all open for everyone to join and have their views, and ultimately grow the community, the UX design community, everybody in the field. Try and get something together in the local area. So UX in BRUXM, i.e. Birmingham, but it's actually wider than that, aiming to cater for the Midlands. So if you've not shared with your friends or anything like that, please do share our existence with them so that we get more participation and have that snowball effect. So just to, if you have your phone or whatnot, some useful links, but if you scan that QR code, you get to the central UX in BRUXM page. You can join the Slack channel, volunteer to be part of the community or the team itself. If you want to do any roles that are available, feel free to speak to me. And ultimately, again, that engagement, the posting and whatnot. But why are we here today? We've got Jas and Sophie about to do a guest talk, so I'm going to hand over to them to talk about involving analysts early in data-driven research. So over to yourself, Jas. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Right, let me share my screen.
To caveat actually what Briesh was saying, I'm actually in Leicester, and Jas, you're not in Birmingham either, are you?
No, I'm in Coventry.
Aren't you in Coventry? But I didn't want to, I just was like, I'll let you talk, but I was like, yeah, so you can see even we're not Birmingham, so doesn't mean you're not welcome.
Hang on. Doing that affinity sharing thing, which I don't want.
Whilst Jas is sharing the screen, do people want to post in here where they're actually from? Because it'd be interesting to see people of Birmingham or Leicester or kind of how it goes. Don't have to. It's called asking whilst waiting for, that's what we do.
Right. Can everybody see that? Not doing the affinity mirror thing, is it?
I'm not sure what you mean by the affinity mirror. It's not in, I can see the top of your bar, like your URL, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, but you can see the full screen as well, can you, on the PowerPoint?
Yeah. I can't see notes, if that's what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, yeah, sorry.
Oh, we've got another Leicester. Hello, Ren.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm Jas. I'm a senior user researcher, and this is
Sophie, and I'm Sophie Strong. I'm a senior data analyst. So I think it already is being recorded from, I think that's what Priyesh had said. So I think it's been recorded, as in the video's been recorded, but there isn't any Gemini going on. So just to answer the question that's popped in the chat. But just to say a little kind of why we've decided on this presentation. It's more from a data analyst perspective, probably. So if you kind of thinking of projects in general, right? So they kind of start with an idea of a thing that needs to be built, and kind of clients would go, right, we need a person to build a thing, and we need a person to talk to our users to make sure that the thing we're building is fit for purpose and it works, etc. So the kind of mentality of the client tends to be, right, user researchers, developers, they're at the beginning. We can bring other people in later, but obviously if you've got a budget, you kind of choose a couple, right? what we've found is with that, it means further down the line when they start to look at performance metrics and actually seeing whether the product's doing well or not, it could have not been set up in the right way, and it can cause obviously lots of things that we'll talk about in the presentation and kind of elongate that process to actually even say whether or not the product's good or not. So to quote my A-level French teacher, when he was teaching me French, he basically said, don't just speak it, you need to think it. So you need to penser en français. And that's obviously stuck with me because my A-levels weren't just yesterday. But what we're trying to do here is kind of give this mindset of penser on data to people like user researchers that are onboarded at the beginning of a project so that they can kind of ask questions and be our kind of like data mindset ultimately at the beginning so that we can avoid those kind of issues further down the line. And that's kind of ultimately what this is all about. So I'm going to elegantly pass it over to Jazz and we're going to get going into the presentation itself.
Thanks, Sophie. So in this presentation, as Sophie said, we'll uncover a common problem statement that you might or might not have faced, where the way that the data is captured in the product does not meet both and or business user and business needs, and it might be difficult to analyse as the data analyst was not involved early on within your project. And the solution, which we'll walk you through as we go through this presentation, will be that it's important to understand that your data analyst is also a user, balancing user needs with business and data needs, and ensuring that data can be used easily by the business and your users. So just before we start, pop in the chat at what points and how have you might not be a user researcher, you might not be a data analyst, but at what points have you collaborated with data analysts in your work, if you're lucky enough to have been able to. Pop in the chat.
You can count this as an interaction.
Yeah. So it might be that you've never had a data analyst on your team. It might be that you were involved with one a bit later on in your project.
If you don't actually know the answer, like, because obviously sometimes when you're not quite sure that the question's going to be asked of you, you could just say, not really sure because I've never seen them work together. Because that could be, as the part of this is going, well, you know, say researchers might not meet at the same time, they're on the same project, but it's not type of thing. Just interesting to see what points others have.
Mm-hmm. Worked with performance analysts, Sophie, they're quite different, aren't they? Performance analysts.
Very much depends. I'm not going to go into like, because there's differences. Some people say yes, it's the same. Some people say it isn't. Interpretation, because they can all is working in digital. So I'm trying to read.
Michelle in Discord. Okay.
And we need to see what a client have under the hood. Data from the quality of data wasn't good.
Okay.
Tony, I think you've hit something there in a good way.
Yeah, we'll touch on that as we go through, won't we, Sophie?
Yeah.
So interesting, different kind of, we've got, working with them in discovery, working with a performance analyst instead of a data analyst, and then working and then the data's not good. So yeah, interesting themes that we will be touching on as we go through this. So thank you. So moving on then, what I would like you to do in the audience is just imagine for a second a loaf of bread in your mind. What does that look like? Imagine that quickly. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay. Now, I just want you to think how many, when you imagined that loaf of bread, did it look something like this? or did it look something more like this? If you just in the chat, whether it looked more like the one in a loaf of bread or looked more like the second one. So that's brown bread. Second one, can picture. The second one got first from Tony's G. Second one, James. Okay, so what most people do imagine is the second one, and the reason why we imagine that is because in supermarkets, like if you make bread the exact way you want it, the exact flavors you want it, if you want it seeded, you want it sourdough, whatever, then you're going to imagine something like that. But over time, so that bread can be used more widely for sandwiches and various other things to be used commercially from various different companies, it's been molded so that it can be used widely to look like this. So I just want you to hold that thought and just think, sometimes if the data in your product needs to be shared widely or used by different kind of stakeholders for business, etc., it's got to be molded in a way so that it can be widely shared, similar to this bread. So it's just kind of an analogy that we're using so that you can understand why we need to think of that mold when we're thinking about how data in your product is going to be used. So this is an example from a project that I was on at DFE, and it was a survey that was sent out to people who'd done teacher training to understand their experience with whatever teacher training provider that they went with to do their training. So here are some examples where it wasn't in the design of the form, it wasn't thought of in a data-driven way, and a data analyst wasn't, consulted with early on, who would then be analysing this data, which you'll understand when I go through the different scenarios. So this is the first question. So which training provider did you use? And when this survey was designed, the answer to this question was a free text field to be able to put your answer in. So when people were putting their answers for this question, you had people putting in SCIT, or school-centred initial teacher training, or school-centred training, and all of those responses mean the same thing. So school-centred training, basically, but people were putting it in different ways because it's a free text field. And another option that, for example, people were putting was PGCE, just in that acronym form, or postgraduate certificate, postgraduate certification in education, or university training. And again, all those mean the same thing. So the consequence of designing this in a way that it was a free text field for this answer was then the analyst had to manually clean and standardize thousands of entries, which made trend analysis and segmentation difficult and error prone, because obviously they're going to have to sift through and figure out, okay, which of these variations mean the same thing? Does that mean the same as that? So, making that difficult for the data analysts by not thinking in that way of how the data will need to be analysed. Another question in this survey was, how satisfied were you with your training provider? And again, here we had radio buttons from 1 to 5, but the way that the survey was designed was you were allowed to leave this question blank. So over 20% of responses had missing satisfaction scores. So again, the consequence of this, key metrics were skewed, making it hard to determine user segment accurately for that one. And then another question was, when did you do your teacher training? And again, this was a free text field to be able to input your answer in. So we had responses like last year, 4 years ago, 2016, this date to this date, or just this date. So again, the consequence of this, the analyst had to interpret ambiguous entries or even discard some of them entirely. And then the result of, designing this form, simple form, you wouldn't think that it would be too difficult to analyse, but it actually took 4 times longer, the data analysis for this, because the final data set had to be heavily cleaned, significant amount of data either discarded or heavily transformed, couldn't make confident decisions based on the insights. And without that early involvement of the data analyst, even just getting their advice, like, you're going to be analysing the data from this form, can you have a quick look over? It's resulted in inconsistent, messy or unusable data. And I know we're not all lucky to have a data analyst on board on our projects, but just thinking in that data-driven way of, okay, if I have this as a free text format field to reply to, what kind of answers could I get? Some of them might be similar. And just think about your future self when you then have to analyse that data. You're going to have to end up cleaning and sifting through that way. So involve your data analyst when creating that sandwich mould. So hopefully that analogy makes sense now, that we've got to make sure that in that mould, which is the input fields that we use, is it going to be free text, or could that mold have been having different options that you select from? That could have made it easier to analyse this data from this example here. So pass on to Sophie.
Thank you. So obviously we've just talked a little bit about kind of data quality, which Tony, you yourself kind of commented that it was an experience of yours, but kind of, we're not saying that as a data analyst, you'd go, right, I'm going to get onto a project, and because everyone's been poncy on data and everyone's been thinking of data from the beginning, I'm going to sit there and it's going to be all beautiful and I don't need to do any transformation. It's ready to analyze. I can start to story tell. Go. That's an incorrect message. Otherwise, these types of models wouldn't exist. There's always an element of transforming it, from raw data to kind of cleaning it, joining tables together. So there's a modeling piece. You might have heard of star model. But the reason why it's called star is because it actually kind of looks like a star. That's what my arms are doing. And then, so like I said, there's always an element of doing it. It's just what we're trying to talk about is a lot of the times on projects as well, you talk about how long is your piece of string. So when people say to me, oh, how long is it going to take you to do the data analysis? Well, you're going, well, if it was clean, or there've been thoughts of it in the beginning. If we go to the next slide, it's good because there's some examples of where it didn't go as good as we'd have liked to. It's minimizing the effort just to cleanse the data. When you're cleansing the data, you're not actually providing insight really, apart from there's a lot of data to cleanse and cleansing that, and it's not necessarily the story that a client wants. The client wants to know how the product's performing. So the quicker we can do that, the better. So a couple of examples, as you can see here. This is kind of when Ponce on data didn't happen. So the left-hand side, that find a service button is an actual button. And I know obviously a lot of you are, my assumption is this UX because it's UX BRUXM. So you can see that there's been care and attention of, it's been designed well because there's rounded edges. It's a certain type of blue. It's not just a kind of out of the box, pop a button on, it functions. So from a front end user perspective, it's brilliant. But as you can see on the right hand side, it's find a service and lots of things after the fact. From this slide, it's really easy to go, oh, it's find a service. So if I was to look in the tool that I got this from, I'd go, oh, I know what button it means. So it said 1,000 clicks yesterday. It's just that. But if you think about it, it's not me looking at this data. It's, it's got to be prepared for senior leadership. They're not going to want it cleansing. There might be another button that says find a service, but it's a different page and it's got a different data quality issue. It just kind of, you can see that someone hasn't clicked it because all you needed to do was click it and see if it's getting collected and how it was getting collected. So it's kind of testing it from the back end as well. Similar to the next one, which was a little bit more complicated. So again, thinking of the user front end, if they're trying to find a service, how Jazz was saying it, like, free field text, just want to type something and find something. So they might type the word sandwich and then it comes up with, 10 results, and then they delete it to sand and it's 100. It's brilliant. When it's data collecting though, it's collecting it every time a user types. Now, myself and Jazz, I can guarantee we've never tested it, but we don't type at the same speed. That's no disrespect, it's just human nature. So you can't go, right, I'm going to set it at X time, so that'll be fine, because it might miss or collect too much data, you just don't know. Ultimately, it made it really difficult, the way it was collecting, to even just say how many searches were performed, because in the example you can kind of see there was 56 different rows of data for one search because someone wrote a very long sentence. So just to say, 100 searches for yesterday took a lot of time, and obviously clients don't expect it to take a lot of time, and it's just how many quantitative, it's not even qualitative, we haven't even got into that realm yet. So again, it's just a couple of examples to say, like, that's kind of where you can see where it's not quite taken, because it was just a click of a button to test, to go, well, what's it actually look out like, show me the reality of it, type of thing. But kind of moving to the next slide and thinking again of not necessarily Ponzi on data, it's more thinking of from a user researcher perspective. And of obviously anyone else that might be a user researcher on the call apart from Jazz, you interview people, you talk to people, you gain their impressions on things, and you theme things, etc. So interviewers, you can interview us early. We don't need to be on the same project. You don't need to be on the same product. Obviously, like myself and Jazz have never been on the same project before, but we could, support each other, because a lot of the websites I could possibly access it now, so I can take a look and understand what tools you have or what you don't have. We're more than happy kind of being that element in the sky as such, just help that kind of data mindset kind of get embedded, because if you do involve us early, it means you can factor us in as user needs into your research. Things like, is it collecting data? You need the data in the first instance to do it. And it can be quite kind of disheartening when you get to a project going, well, it's been live for a while and you've never thought of collecting the data that you need for the business or the user needs. Now, Jazz probably knows that now I'm going to sing, but I sing basically so it kind of like, it sticks in the mindset a little bit. So we are there for you. So if anyone's listened to Friends or knows it, hopefully you can get that. But we are genuinely there for you, because it's all about this collaboration. But also, if you think of it from a selfish perspective, if we can embody this whole data mindset, it's going to be easier on my job when I go on to a different project. So, it's all for one-on-one for all. But yeah, passing that back to Jazz.
So as Sophie said, it's trying to think in that data-driven way to, make that achieve what will be easier for the business, for your users, and for your data analysts, thinking them as your user, speaking to them at the beginning. But it's not always that easy. Sometimes it can be difficult to, balance business needs and user needs. Structured data is easier to analyse and share for the wider business, but sometimes our users do need to, input data in a free text format, for example. And this is where you just need to achieve that balance so that both needs are met. This is a quote from a project that I was on at the Ministry of Justice. We were designing a service for users to be able to input resettlement planning. And this was a quote: "You're limiting the checklist in my head. You won't be able to think of everything in your drop down. I once had a man arrested with a cat in his pocket. I had to make a referral to RSPCA." So as you can imagine, we were trying to design the service in a way that the data inputted was structured, there was drop downs, but our users needed to put in all sorts of different things, rich kind of narrative of somebody's resettlement needs and resettlement planning. And they said, you're just trying to limit it into a drop down, and we just need a free text box to put what we want to put in. So we were meeting business needs, but we weren't meeting our users' needs, and we risked our users actually dropping off from using our service. Here's another example: is the person in prison under threat outside of prison. We just had a yes/no option. Have they been involved in any gang activity? Again, we just had a yes/no option, but they wanted to put a lot more in, who are they under threat by? Is it their partner? Well, we need to know that, because if they're having visits in prison from their partner and there's DV going on, we need to spot that for safeguarding. Are they in a gang? Yes, no, fine. But which gang? We might have somebody from the rival gang on the wing. We have to make sure we don't put them in the same place. Again, safeguarding. They needed to be able to put a lot more in, not just a yes, no. So pass to Sophie about how you shouldn't be scared of free text either.
You can be scared. If you are, it's absolutely fine. We don't discriminate, but we don't need to be. But this is all about balancing the user and the business needs. So Jazz obviously mentioned that, you know, we're limiting that checklist in the mind because we're going too structured. It was going too much down the whole, we just need these things, they just need to fill it out, off we go, we'll get the data that we need. But if you're limiting user feedback, you're not going to know what the user's saying because they're not going to be able to provide it. So this is why myself and Jazz really wanted to do a presentation together, is that balancing. We're not saying it's all about users, we're not saying it's all about data, it's actually a combination of it. So from this, really quickly, with the yes or no in a gang, from a data perspective, you can go, right, what percentage of people are in a gang? From that, can we see maybe, you know, oh, it's higher percentage over here or lower over here? Supporting in user research, just to say, right, you might want to interview the people over here more than over here because you're going to get richer conversations. And also with the free field text, if, say, for example, Jazz had said, you know, like, there's going to be certain gangs that can't be together. We know that inherently, but what we should be doing on this project in particular, you'd have like a list of them. So go, right, gang A and gang B, no, not together. And then what you would do is obviously from the free field text, if they've quoted I'm in gang A or not gang B, you know, etc., you can then say, right, we can use those together to say these people avoid, you know, because of safeguarding issues. And it's really important because, well, you never know what might happen and everything. So if we move to the next slide, all this kind of like, as you can feel that we've had like a sandwich theme throughout. So anyone that's tried baking bread and has patience, well done, because it is a science, is bread. It's not just as you have to follow a recipe. And kind of what we're trying to kind of make from this is your free field text is like your seeds in your bread. So when I was younger, it used to be quite bog standard, brown and white, ham and cheese, off you go. Maybe you get butter. Whereas now, as Jazz the word that Jazz uses is bougie. It's got more bougie in life. And having that free field text is that supplementary kind of like, you know, onions in your bread, seeds in your bread, that type of thing. It gives that flavour and that richness so that you can, in this case, really support people to not be kind of near people that they shouldn't. And so this is why it's a really good example to show how it's really important. It's not just, you know, let them write what they want to write. They need that output. And then we can use data tools to kind of cement it after the fact. But yeah, slight audience participation requested now on the next slide. It is just slight. It is just one question of kind of pop in the chat me or yes or something like that, something positive to know you agree. But basically, how many of you either been on a project designing a service or maybe, you know, another type of product and then had to go back? So it's all live and designed and wonderful and happy, you know, go lucky. And then you've had to go back in order to collect some sort of data to get it right for a dashboard. Have anyone experienced that? Or even though it's not just about data collection in its own right, maybe data amendment. So obviously when I was showing you that find a service button, it didn't collect it very well. So if anyone actually had to go back and redevelop, redesign, completely delete, I don't know, like you could kind of argue it could happen like that. I'm hoping that wasn't because of me. I literally read it and went, whoops. Yeah, cool. So
yes, I'm going to put yes as well because I've experienced it.
Yeah, I've experienced it on most of the projects, even if it's just one metric. Sometimes it's quite interesting when people talk about it, but they don't actually kind of. I think the best argument to make is it's great if you know it now. You can still kind of recover, but you've always lost historical data. You can't go back in time and collect that data. If you know, you could start, I don't know, that free field text from today, brilliant. But if 6 months ago a user was on the website and had some really good insight, well, you've lost it completely. You can't ever go backwards. Sorry, I was trying to read the comments at the same time. Yeah, unfortunately, it's common, not uncommon, which isn't great. But again, taking it back to the dough and bread analysis, I have made bread in the past, and it's actually really annoying. The proving part, that's the part where you have to just leave it alone and trust that it does a thing. So that's where it's like, you have to put it under a radiator or something for like 4 hours and put a tea towel on it so it rises. Unfortunately, in data, I think because it's that whole, better get it done, better get it, need some performance metrics, I need them now. That proving process just goes too quickly. So like I said, bread making, if you really look at it, it really, really is a science. Baking in itself is a science. It's why Mary Berry and everything get paid quite a lot. But basically, it's flat and horrible. It doesn't work. So it's about kind of thinking about it in the beginning, and thinking again of users and how users would use it. Are they going to use it, or would they not use it? And basically, it's a meeting is early, a lot larger system to avoid a lot of effort in the future that could have been avoided and used for a different purpose as such. Yeah, I'm going to pass you over to the sandwich girl herself.
The sandwich girl. So as early as possible, talk to those users who will need the data. So we've got a bit of a sandwich making going on here. So in the examples that we've shared, like the MOJ example, Ministry of Justice example, we've got the bread, which is your narrative of reoffending. This holds it all together, the story that you're trying to tell. It was those users who needed those free text fields to be able to tell the story of somebody's reoffending and resettlement planning. We had the Mayo, the yes-no answers that the business needed for their data analysis. Spreads easily, but narrow, pretty bland, wanted to input more. Pickles time taken to reach resettlement goals. So this was where the managers wanted a data dashboard, sharp, punchy, adds crunch and clarity to the picture, so they can predict future trends and that kind of thing. Your cheese, your dashboards to show those trends and gaps, smooth, versatile, everybody wants a slice. Your bacon, which is your qualitative data, full of flavour, the heart and the why behind those numbers. Again, your bread, your narrative of that reoffending. So just thinking together holistically, talk to your users who will need that data. What will they need from it so it can be designed to meet those needs?
And I'm going to say, and a lot of the time, I think people ask, so what? Why should we make such an amazing bougie sandwich? And this is the why, because the insights that people like myself, a data analyst, would go. Again, really need to, I know we're talking about users a lot, but at the end of the day, no matter what project you're on, there's going to be a policy. There's going to be some wider business needs that is a mandatory requirement that needs to be reviewed every 3 months, possibly more. It all depends, obviously, from Jazz's perspective when they're talking about things with gang, I don't know, it's all going to be different, but you need to react quickly and it needs to be accurate. So obviously in doing that upfront sandwich making, you're setting yourself up for success. Again, balancing business and user needs. It's all about balance. This is about like a sandwich seesaw. But one of the really wonderful things I think is, because anyone that's been on projects, we're in the tech industry, right? It's busy, it changes a lot, there's a lot going on. But if you can have, a team member such as a data analyst be able to go, right, you know what? I know that, there's reactive elements, but we can also start to change these projects to be a bit more proactive and predict and influence, so that we can support people focusing and going, right, I know we're in July now, but do you know that we've predicted that in, end of September, there's going to be a lot of traffic on this web page, which means X, Y, Z. Again, it's that actionable piece so that you can actually start to go, well, we can put the people in the right place, either our backlogs and blockers and things like that. It's all up to, it's all to do with your sandwich making skills, really. But yeah, back to you in the sandwich making.
Thanks, Sophie. So going forward, just remember to ask, how would you like your sandwich? So if you ask this at the start, then your product team can make sure that they design a service that meets the needs of your users and meets the needs of business, and it's not annoying for your data analyst when they're having to analyze that data from your service. If you do this, then you'll end up designing something that meets everybody's needs and everybody's happy. But if you don't ask that early on and involve the right people, talking to your data analyst like they're your user, everything that we've spoke about throughout this presentation, then you risk ending up designing something that it might meet your business needs, but it might not meet your user needs, or vice versa, or it might meet both, but you might end up with bad data that's taking 4 times longer to analyze. That like that example right at the beginning, the DFE example. So basically just asking that and thinking in a data-driven way right at the start can mean that you end up producing something that's really great. And then next slide, Sophie.
So this is quite relevant, I think, for this group, because obviously a lot of this has been about user researchers and data analysts working together, whereas this is more about kind of thinking of data analysts who are in part designers as well. So there's obviously, there's a kind of story that ultimately data is a product in its own right as well. So when like a data analyst produces, even if it's something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, it's still kind of a product, an asset. We should be thinking of how a user can use it, even if it is something as simple as a pivot table and a slicer. So at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for someone else, why have you built it, kind of thing. So it's good to kind of think of, well, you may or may not have a UX on your project as well. I think everyone's kind of got, when you get onto projects, they're all different. You never know what you're going to get, and it'll change as well. But we can, as in data analysts, can work with designers as well to kind of go, right, well, what are your expertise as a UX? Well, we can do this, we can do that, we know that. And it's furthermore collaborating to basically say this story doesn't just end with UR and data. It's not about, yep, brilliant, thanks UR for having a data mindset at the beginning when you're onboarded with clients. What if a project was just UX at the beginning? Again, it's just trying to think of this and kind of, it's trying to break down those barriers that don't physically exist but can mentally exist, because you think of your own profession first sometimes, and that's valid because, well, I've got to learn. Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our sandwich related activities. I'm going to give you a doggy bag that is not a doggy bag, but it is a sandwich to mentally take away. So recognize that a data analyst is also a user. So I am going to sing again. So it's basically, remember we're a user, because we are. And if that helps, thinking of go, remember we're a user, because I think sometimes that kind of triggers something to go, oh, actually, if it's a user group and I'm a user researcher, I would do 1, 2, 3. Interviewers, ask us our opinions, etc. As I said, get us involved early. We're really, really keen as data analysts, as a community, to get involved early. We'll drop things and go, yeah, we'll help you out, because we know what it feels like when it hasn't been involved. So we want to support as much as possible, either ourselves or a colleague. It's supporting the data analyst community ultimately. Designing with data requires balancing different needs, so it's not, you've got to take that into account when you're designing it. Like you saw, there was a find a service button which seemed really nice and wonderful from front end, but it wasn't, and unfortunately that happens quite often, and it's just quite arduous, etc. And as mentioned, it's working in collaboration. It's all for one and one for all. Obviously there's a lot more professions that we've not discussed today, because otherwise we'd be here for quite some time. It's not about leaving them out. It's about trying to solidify this relationship between UR and data. As I've said before, clients tend to onboard user researchers at the beginning. So let's support that mentality from the beginning, because it'll flow through beautifully and everything will be amazing. And we can start to do a lot more fun insights that people would like to aspire to. So that's it. There's one last slide, which is all about feedback, because at the end of the day, we've got a user researcher on here. So it's all going to be about the feedback, isn't it? Which is good. But I think, Jazz, you're about to pop that in the chat.
There we go.
We have done this internally already, and we did look at the feedback afterwards, because something that I've found before, you can kind of like provide your feedback and you're not quite sure where it goes, what happened with it. So we can obviously link in with Priyesh if someone does provide feedback and kind of say, well, what have we or have we not done with it, depending on what the outcome is. That is the last slide, apart from the thank you slide. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, do share us some feedback so that we can make iterations on this and, do the next one. But if anybody's got any questions, it would be great to open up to some discussion now. I'll pass back to Priyesh to facilitate that.
Hey, thank you both. That was great. I was going to say the same thing for the audience. I think James has raised his hands for a question. So, James, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, James.
Hey, really, really good presentation, both of you. Really, really insightful. And I think you could make it into a musical like Broadway like show. So really, really good. So you talked about the importance of bringing data analysts on board early on. I completely agree, especially as like a user researcher. I'm wondering, we're in a lot of these positions where particularly in public sector, they don't bother doing that necessarily, probably because of budgets. Have either of you had any thoughts of how do you convince the client to actually try and bring in a data analyst sort of early on in the project rather than leaving it very, very last minute?
So yeah, we did have discussed that, and it is common that we don't end up having a data analyst on project. So what we're doing with Hippo at the moment is this will get turned into a blog post, which will be used as in bids and things like that, so that when we're doing resourcing for our clients, and that kind of thing, this can be used to demonstrate the value in having a data analyst on board to be able to support in making sure that, something great can be built for the users. So that's something that we're doing as a next step. But other than that, I'm sure, we'll do some more thinking around that, definitely.
There's another thing that I've started in my own project, because I'm a live example of coming in quite late, is talking to people about their pain points, because human beings are emotional. So the things that you remember is why I sing, because it makes you laugh and you kind of remember it a little bit more. So if you think about it from clients, they will have definitely, the senior leadership team will have had these last minute audit requests come in, or someone will have experienced that when you're going, hang on a minute, we're doing something proactive. Now we've got to stop that and go to this reactive thing that we didn't know was coming and we're not ready for it. Because obviously a lot of you are saying the data isn't collected at the beginning, So that means that story already exists in the mindset of the client. They've already got it, so they can kind of tie into it and kind of go, actually, yeah, no, I do remember that pain point. Yeah, that was really annoying. That was horrible. Oh God, yeah, I had to stay up all night. I didn't see my kids. And then that other piece of work we forgot about because there was another impact, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That can sometimes get them to remember something to do with data. And it's trying to think of it that way. And James, obviously, I'm sure other people are aware that it isn't just a data analyst that exists in the data profession. You've got people like your data engineers, tech art, other roles within it. So maybe having that kind of chat about data, because what I've learned as well is sometimes because the roles can overlap, as I'm sure a user researcher does with UX and things like that, clients can get muddled as to who to onboard first. And really, if you think about it, is, well, if you need to collect the data and kind of connects the dots. So you might have heard like data pipelines, that type of thing. Really, that's a data engineer role first. Gets the data ready in like a star model or singing or dancing. And then the performance data analyst is the analysing the data once it's ready. It's just they can get very, you do both on you do what you do, don't you? But it's trying to think of that. So it's, like I said, it's A, thinking of pain points and playing to those. And then B, thinking of it from a more data assessment type of perspective of going, well, what's your data maturity level as such? Do you need an engineer before you need an analyst or vice versa? So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, massively. Really, really insightful. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts?
They can be about sandwiches, if that's easier.
Everyone wants a sandwich now.
Yeah.
I have a similar question, or just a follow on from what James asked. And you kind of explained already, Sophie, but would you say, so anybody involved in the team needs to have a data-driven mindset in that sense? So obviously, if you've got the luxury of a data analyst as a specific role, it makes life easier. But if you don't, then is it a case of taking on I'm a user experience designer, for example. Do I take on that responsibility to suggest that, or maybe it's a maturity aspect from the team itself or the client that maybe they're not aware that this is an important thing to consider? Is it then just taking that responsibility yourself maybe, and like you said, having that conversation about data?
Yeah, it's been that T-shaped consultant, because obviously I don't know kind of how long people have been in the industry as such, but the way I see it is it's not just, it works both ways. It's not just about UX, UR being data-driven mindset. It's about me thinking of how the UR would react. So we've said obviously with that whole field text versus the yes and no, it's that balance. It is all about the balance. But I love data and I always will love data. But the why behind it is because of the power. It shows you whether your product's good or not. Ultimately, if you really like in really basic terms, it's going, is all this years of effort any good or not? And to not kind of allow that reality to flow as quickly as possible is quite a detriment to a product development perspective if you're really thinking about it. I'm not just talking about being able to provide the senior leaderships with things and policy, etc., but really thinking of it from a mental health perspective. People spend years on products, which is fine and brilliant, but what if someone comes in late and then they've got to redo it? It's quite disheartening to have that happen. So it's personal preference, but I would say we all have some responsibility to an extent to understand each other's disciplines, to understand the impact that we make, and that knock-on, it's that knock-on effect, Priyesh, really, ultimately, is going, well, you might have a task to tackle, for argument's sake, but need 5 different disciplines. What's your order of business? And I really enjoy understanding other professions. I always have. It feels like the right way to grow as a consultant ultimately, and not be so siloed. Because at the end of the day, anyone can go on sick for a long time, and in my mind, if someone's off sick for 6 months, you should be able to then support their roles somehow if you can. I don't know if it did answer, but that was my answer.
No, that's cool. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Any more questions from the audience that remains? Alrighty, cool. Just a quick one as well from me in terms of admin and resources. Are you willing to share the deck? Is that open for people to refer back to? Whether you want to make it kind of read only or whatever, that's fine. But it would be good to share that for those that might have missed the actual session. But brilliant, awesome. I think I'm gonna go make a sandwich. So
enjoy.
All right. Thanks everyone. Have a good evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.